Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk southern wax myrtles. This is Morella cerifera, otherwise known as the southern wax myrtle or bayberry, southern bayberry. There is a northern wax myrtle as well, that is Morella pennsylvanica. Very similar, honestly very similar. This one has this has a kind of lime green new foliage on it, a little bit of a pinkish red hue to the very newest foliage, and then it matures into like a gray green, really interesting foliage down at the bottom. These can be tree formed, and the bark is actually quite nice on them when they're lifted up into a tree, or be kept in a shrub form like they are here in these containers, and then kept in by pruning it in some size that you want to try to keep it in. Interesting fragrance to the foliage. I think some people will love it and some people won't. I actually like the smell of wax myrtles. It's really interesting, kind of a minty, a little bit of a minty fragrance to it. Great shrub, and another one of our just great native shrubs. It's has a lot of benefits to our native pollinators, native birds. So southern wax myrtles can actually reach 20 to 25 feet in height. I would not recommend that you let them get that tall. Especially up here in my zone in 7B in Raleigh, where we can get a little bit of ice and snow, these are actually quite fragile in those types of events. And so I would probably want to maintain this in that 10 to 15 foot range. I think that's probably the sweet spot where you can get it to thicken up enough and not be a danger, to this type of thing that would, any kind of weight at all on this. This is what happens to them. And I have seen that and experienced that. If they break off, they grow right back. It's not that big of a deal, but again, thickening it up as it grows is probably a good idea. They get a kind of an inconspicuous flower on it here in the spring, and they've actually just flowered at this point. So it's sometime in mid to late spring is when you'll see these flowers on them. This becomes a very persistent drupe that stays on them for a long time, a fruit-like thing, and the birds absolutely love them. Southern wax myrtles are hardy in zone 7 to 10. Those of you living in colder areas would just use the northern wax myrtle in those areas. These are probably best. These are growing out in the middle of an open field in full sun, and you can see how full they're growing. They'll actually grow into quite a bit of shade, but the more shade you're going to give them, probably the more thin they're going to be, the more they're going to stretch up for the light. Out in the wild, we'll see these in part shade, dappled shade spaces, and they really like those spaces. But to have a really full, compact plant, if you're using it as a screening plant, the more sun, the better. They're great for wetland restorations, great on banks to prevent erosion, great for forest woodlands. Any kind of native restoration that's taking place will typically have wax myrtles included in those types of spaces. In terms of ornamental gardening, they're going to make great screening plants, great border plants if you have a part shade area. I've always found that they're pretty tolerant of the roots of other plants, and so they can come into spaces that already maybe have some existing roots in them and compete just fine with those things. Great in any kind of formal hedging that you want to do. Again, they can be kept kind of whatever size you want, so you could just have them all pruned the exact same way like you would any other kind of formal hedge. This is one adaptable plant. I mean, it really will tolerate all kinds of different soil types. These are nitrogen fixing plants. That's what allows them to grow in some of our wetlands down in the eastern part of North Carolina, eastern part of South Carolina, and down into East Georgia and Florida. It gives them it's an advantage to be able to kind of create nitrogen out of the air and fix it into the soil on its own, so it can take soils that aren't the best. They're pretty tolerant of higher winds. It has a kind of a waxy coating on the leaf, which I think allows it to hold up a little better than some other things might during winter winds. Again, just really adaptable to almost any conditions. These are also salt tolerant and urban and very tolerant of urban spaces, so pollution as well. Anything that's salt tolerant is probably also going to be dog pee tolerant, which is another benefit. We need some of those plants in our gardens if we garden with male dogs. extremely drought tolerant once established, but also able to sit in wetter, boggier spaces. So kind of amazing adaptable plant. This can be pruned however you want to prune it. So if you want to prune from the top down, you can do that, you know, anytime from late winter through about midsummer, you know, in that window, and keep them as, I think you're probably going to expect to keep these, you know, 8 feet or taller, but you can go through and kind of shear them off and keep them fuller, or you can start the process of, you know, limbing them up, deciding a couple, you know, picking 2 or 3, 4, 5 trunks that you want to keep, and start, you know, taking off some of the lateral branches down at the bottom and just lift it up and turn it into a small tree, at which point you could underplant it with some other evergreen things, maybe something that's chartreuse or, you know, some other color that you could bring in with it. This is a native plant that's very tolerant of a lot of soil types. You really don't have to fertilize them. We tend to fertilize our entire ornamental landscape with an organic fertilizer once a year in the late winter, and probably less than the bag is going to recommend we use. So we use very little anyway. This plant really isn't going to require any ongoing fertilizing. You know, if it seems happy and green and it's growing, I don't think you really need to think about fertilizing these once they're established. And then water it in. Well, you're responsible for it. When you first put it in the ground, you're going to have to do some watering on it. Once you get 2 or 3 years underneath it, I think you're probably not going to have to do a lot of ongoing watering, as long as you're getting regular rainfall in your area. These could go a prolonged period of time without additional water. The fragrance in the foliage is what makes this rabbit and deer resistant. So, and pretty much deer resistant. I've seen, you know, when I grew wax myrtles for 20 some years, and we would get some leaf spotting and some minor issues on them, but overall very disease and insect resistant. So this is our great native southern wax myrtle. Thanks for watching.